think everyone. So I'm going to get started. My name is Sherry Carlson. I'm the Chief Programs Officer for Let's Grow Kids. And I'm going to go through the grant program. I know some of you have participated in the grant program or have thought about participating in the grant program. So you've heard some of this before. So a couple things, if everyone can make sure you're on mute so that everyone can hear, that would be great. And as I've done before in these info sessions, I'm going to go through the entire presentation, which is about 20 minutes, and then take questions after. This way, for those of you that feel all set with the information, you can pop off and get on with the rest of this beautiful day. And those of you that have questions or want to hear what questions others have, you could stay on and participate a bit longer. So that's how we'll go through. And somebody, make sure everyone's on mute. Great. So I'm going to go over the entire presentation, and then I'm going to repeat this beginning section at the very end. So once I go through the guidelines, if you feel that your expansion or startup or project is a fit for these grant guidelines, these grant requirements, the next thing you would do is you would submit an inquiry form. I'm going to put the link in the chat for this form. And what that form does is that triggers a follow-up from one of the Let's Grow Kids staff members to talk with you more one-on-one about your project and what you're seeking funding for. And they can, sort of work with you to find out if you really are a good match. And what happens after that, if it is a good match, it fits the criteria, the timeline, all of those things, you would be invited to apply for the grant and be given a grant link at that time. So that's just, I'll say that again at the end, but that's really the process. After you hear this, if you haven't already filled in the inquiry form, you should do that. Some of you I know have, and you're already connected with Let's Grow Kids support. But if you haven't done that, once you hear this, that would be your next first step. Typically, you'll hear from a Let's Grow Kids staff person and, within like 24, 48 hours or, 2 work days. If you haven't, you could certainly reach out to me. But we monitor that and people reach out pretty quickly. It is a time, sometimes people are on vacation, they have college graduations, and there could be some little glitches there. So let us know if you're not hearing in a timely way. We do have someone that's not on mute, so it's really hard for everyone to hear. I apologize for that. I keep repeating that, but I know it's hard for people to hear when others aren't on mute. So let's talk about this grant. So this grant is the grant deadline, we'll start there, is July 11th. So that's probably the first thing that you might want to know. The inquiry form, which is the link that I've sent to you, will close at the end of the day on July 1st. And what that does is that if we have an inquiry come in July 1st, that only really gives us, in terms of like weekdays, 5 or 6 days to work with people. So you'll want to, if you feel this is a good fit, you'll want to fill out that inquiry form by July 1, with the grant deadline being July 11th, and the review committee meeting the 3rd or 4th week of July. And typically notifications would be like early August timeframe. So about a week to 10 days after the review committee meets. The other piece is that generally programs that are recommended for funding would get half of that funding in their grant award letter. We do have some situations where programs are on a real fast track, and sometimes you will get the entire payment in that first award letter, but that's a decision that's negotiated after you've been recommended for an award. So who is eligible to apply? So this grant is eligible for expansions or startup programs, center-based, family, childcare homes, could be private nonprofits, for-profits, public schools, that will increase access to spaces for infant, toddlers, and in this round, it includes preschoolers. So though this is the first round, I think, since 2019 that it does include preschool expansion as an eligibility. But having said that, infants and toddlers are the priority. So if we have lots of funding requests, infant and toddler care is what is most needed in our state. So those asks would be would receive priority in terms of, like, as we're looking at what funding's available and recommendations for awards. But preschool expansion is also eligible in this grant round. The other thing that's important is that programs should be open 48 weeks a year, at least 50 hours a week to apply for the maximum amounts. Programs that are open less than that, so if you're open less than 48 weeks, less than 50 hours a week, may be invited to apply, but you would be invited at a lesser amount. So for centers, the amount you can apply for is up to $50,000. And for family childcare homes, it's up to $20,000. If you are not open the 48 weeks a year or 50 hours or 50 hours a week, the amounts are half that. So if you're a center and you're opening a program that runs different than that, you could apply up to 25,000, and you could, if you're a family childcare home, up to 10,000. The other piece that is important, sometimes we have projects that are significantly large in the expansion or startup that they're doing, and they may occasionally be invited to apply for more than 50,000. So we have had some projects that were, increasing by 100 kids, increasing, by 78 kids. In some cases, you may be, if that's a kind of project you're working on, you may be invited to apply for a larger amount. There's one other category that you are eligible to apply for, and that is if you're an existing program, or there's actually two other categories where you would be eligible to apply. One is if you're a program that's existing and you're looking at offering non-standard hour care. So that would be care that is after 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. or weekend care. So you're looking to, help fill the needs of folks who may need care that is outside a traditional 7:30 to 5:30, 7 to 6 workday. There are funds that would, if you're going to try to implement a change in that way to fill a need for that kind of care, you could apply for funds. And the other category is if you're a new program that has opened within the last 12 months and identified, some fiscal needs that would just help you have a stronger start, you're eligible to apply for funds as well. So those are all of the, so it's about adding infants, toddlers, or preschoolers, non-standard hour care, or programs that are newly opened, since July 1, 2021. So those are all the categories that would make you eligible. And then we already talked about public schools, not for profit, for profit, all of those. If you are a for-profit program, there's just additional paperwork that you'll need to work on with us. And that's what allows us to actually grant funds to for-profits. So that's the only little difference in that. We need some different kinds of assurances and different kinds of paperwork that we need on our end. I'm just going to pause. I have some of my Let's Grow Kids colleagues on this call to just see if I missed any of the eligible categories.
Good. Sherry, what if you expanded your care in the last, say, 6 months?
You would also be eligible. So if you expanded care and you've identified some fiscal, support that would help that expansion. Sometimes you expand and you realize that you need more of this, or this would be helpful, or you might need a little bit of money for recruiting bonuses to fill those spaces, that kind of thing. So that also, thank you, Lorraine. Great question. Let's see. Talked about the priorities.
No, just
One,
wait a sec.
oh, Kelsey. Kelsey came off mute, maybe by accident. I think I can. She's all set. The other thing that happens throughout our grant program that some of you know is we provide technical assistance for the grant program. So that starts, once your inquiry form is submitted and you connect with a Let's Grow Kids staff person, typically working in your region. And that TA is provided throughout the grant application process, as well as for at least a year into the grant. So those are some of the components of the grant as well. So we really work with you to help you identify, how to best present your idea. We really work if it doesn't feel like a fit, based on doing these grants since 2018, that that you don't spend a lot of time if it's not going to meet the criteria of what we know will get a recommendation. So that TA is really important. We talked about the priorities. Let's see. So what can the money fund? That's a question. So it can fund capital investments. So it can fund construction, renovations, those kinds of things you might need to, if you're starting a new facility and you need some investments in fit up, or you're trying to add and you need an addition or to put up some walls. So it can fund those types of additions. For family childcare homes, you really want to focus on what are those capital expenses, those construction types of expenses that are needed to provide care in your home. So sometimes it's a new egress, or you need some, revisions to your stairs or something removed for supervision. So those are the types of things for family childcare homes that are most likely to receive awards. Fences, those kinds of things. The things that are not typically recommended for funding are things that you would need as part of your home anyway, like if you need a roof and or things that are more like enhancements, like a paved driveway. If that isn't really needed to serve children, it's going to be more difficult for that to receive a positive recommendation for awards. The other is any equipment or material that you need to serve children, whether it's a startup. So if it's cribs and tables and playground equipment and all of that, because you're starting a new program, or if you're expanding a program, it could be things that you need to be able to add that age group or create that new space. And so it's for that added service or added children to the program. It's not an equipment grant. That really is tied to expansion of spaces or expansion of opportunity for non-standard hour workers. Training costs related to your project for expansion or startup. So that could be, for your employees. So what they might need. It could be for, internal trainings, anything related to training costs for staff for your project. Also, signing bonuses, short-term salary support. Sometimes when you're expanding or you're starting up, you don't fill every single space right away. And so we've been offering some short-term salary supports, typically around 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks would be the maximum that would be considered. And I would say historically, there hasn't been more than 4 weeks typically recommended, but we do offer the opportunity for 4 to 6 weeks of some kind of salary support to get a program up and running. Also, any kind of program changes to serve more children. So you may have a space that you serve 6 infants in, and you could get a waiver and serve 9 if you hired another staff person. So that would, that might be a place where you're asking for some help in training, recruitment, and supporting some of that salary expense in their initial days to get them up and running. So if you have some, just slight program changes that help you add more children, that's another opportunity for you to ask for grant support to get that going. So anything related to, really what you need to achieve the goal of offering care for more children or more hours of care for those non-standard hours. So any kind of construction or site work, or if you have water or sewer work that might need to be done, all of that that support is eligible for grant funds. One of the things that two things we ask you do right away is, one, to understand the zoning in your area right away, to understand if it's even feasible to do your project, what might be the barriers, what might be things you need to ask for funding for, because you need to get parking worked out, or you need something, before you're going to be able to do that. The other thing is that we ask that you start the licensing application process, either for if you're going to be expanding or starting up. The Child Development Division has individuals from the licensing division on our grant review team, and that they often are looking to see if there's been any contact with the grant. Let's see. So those are a couple things. So just in terms of the grant application, we've tried to make it a very accessible grant application with, we're looking to get information, but we really don't want to make it a contest on who can write the best. We really just want it to be what will have impact and what meets the criteria. So some of the things just to be thinking about that are in the grant application is, it does ask you to just talk about your area and who you've connected with that sort of informs the need for care, and what just kind of get a sense of what what else is going on in your community, so that you're strategically building additional care into your area, and there's communication about that. So we ask about sort of that, how you you have the need in your area, who else has informed this project, and that could be your regional BBF council, or it could be you're part of an early childhood network, those types of things, and so you're really clear that you're complementing what else is happening in your region. We also will ask about the need in your area. So if you have any wait list information, or there's a stalled at the start report that for every county that talks about the need for care, if there's been some closures or impending, all of that we ask about that. We're going to want to know how many spaces you're adding, or how many hours you're adding if you're looking at doing non-standard care. So that is important. We're going to ask about the leadership and personnel. So what is the the lead for the project? What is their experience with early education programs? Those pieces. We'll ask about your workforce strategy. So how you plan to recruit, retain, what kinds of strategies you have related to that. That's generally what the application includes, with some demographic questions and a few other questions in there as well. So we've talked about knowing your permitting and zoning process right away. That can hold up a project. So that's important. The other piece is to connect with the Child Development Division, because they immediately start a file on that, so they can tell that there's been some action there. And willingness to meet grant conditions. As I said, some of the for-profits have additional grant conditions, but some of the conditions that are in the grant, some are very specific to a project. So it may be, we will recommend funding after you've done this. So sometimes there's conditions like that. And other times there are, some of the general conditions are things like that you will participate in Let's Grow Kids TA during the year of the grant, that there's some things that you will take children who are on the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. So there's some other little pieces in there that would be in your grant agreement letter. So you would have sight to those The other thing, a couple other things, if you're thinking about a startup, in order to be competitive, you really need to have a site, either a site identified or, or better, a site that you already own or rent or lease or is far along. So it's really hard to be competitive if you're in a position like, I know they need childcare. I'll use my own hometown in Ferrisburg, and I'm hoping to buy a house and offer it. Like, that isn't going to be competitive in our grant program. Or I'm looking for property to open up a center. You really need to be further along in the process to be competitive in this grant program. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to put the link for as I said, if you're, I'm not quite done yet, but I want to put the link in again. If you're feeling that this grant program is a match for what you've been thinking of and you haven't connected with any Let's Grow Kids staff, you're going to want to fill out the inquiry form, which will trigger someone to get back in touch with you, likely early next week. Let's see. And I just want to remind you, after they get in touch with you and talk more with you, that's when the decision is made on whether or not to invite you to apply, based on that you meet all the criteria and are in a position to have a competitive application. I'm just going to look through the guidelines here just to see if there's anything else that I didn't go over. Any other? The other thing that I will say is that we are planning to have another grant cycle in November. However, I will just say the caveat: we've had tremendous response to these two calls that are coming up. So, if by chance we were in a position that we had, so many requests that we could fund them all in July, and they were on sort of the trajectory of projects being, up and running within the next year or so, there is a small chance we wouldn't have another grant cycle. We'll know more about that in the next few weeks, as we start to work with all of those that have expressed interest in the grant program. And in some cases, you may have a better opportunity in November if you're a project that isn't very far along. But your Let's Grow Kids technical assistance individual will have a good idea of where we're at with that and try to guide you in the best way. So I'm gonna look at the questions, and I'm gonna pause in case any of my Let's Grow Kids colleagues want to speak up about something I could have forgotten or have a question I didn't address that I usually do. All right, so the first question is, and so those of you who feel good to go, if you haven't filled out the link yet, do that. Thank you for attending. So that's, your next step would be to be put on that link, get your information in the link or continue working with your Let's Grow Kids TA person. For the rest of you, I'm going to take questions. You can either put them in the chat or you can ask them. I'll do the chat questions first right now. But those of you that want to pop off and have your lunch or whatever else you're doing, you're welcome to do that as too. What if you would reduce slots and now be adding those slots back? That does not qualify for an expansion. You already have had a licensed capacity that you were serving, or the only time those types of changes within programs have been funded is if you had 2 preschool rooms and you decided that you're going to serve infants and toddlers in one of those spaces, because infant and toddler spaces have a priority. Sometimes those types of internal changes have been funded, but there's been ARPA grant funding and some other funding opportunities that were targeted at trying to sustain programs or bring programs back to where they were pre-COVID. So this grant fund is really about expanding spaces, and I expect that it will be so competitive that it would be hard to compete with new spaces that are being established or expanded or non-standard hour care.
Teresa Forbes, I was just wondering, if you were to apply for this, can you also, because I hadn't applied, my program is being asked to relocate, so currently, and so I'm looking at different spots. So my understanding is that even though I haven't solidified that spot, then after I can still apply for this. Can I also apply for the ARPA grant that gets done on June 1st or no?
So so I think I understood your question, Teresa. So the only way you can apply for ARPA funding is if you're already a licensed program before June 1st. So some of the new projects we supported, like in January, that were able to get up and running quickly, were able to participate in ARPA because they were licensed before June 1st, but the ARPA program closes June 1st. So if you're not if you don't have a license for your program, then you are not able to apply for that.
I do, but we're going to have to, we're going to have to close the program and try to reopen something, and hopefully by like fall. So that's what.
Okay. So I would ask CDD about that, about the ARPA piece. In terms of this grant program, if you are expanding and adding spaces, and then you are eligible for this grant program.
Okay. Yeah, I would do a new program. That's what I would.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to go to the chat now. So someone wanted to know, they have a program in their home and they're moving to a new house and wanting to renovate part of that space to continue their program. So there's potential that is eligible for this grant funding, and that would be something that one of the Let's Grow Kids staff people would vet with you more clearly to see sort of what stage you're in terms of all of those pieces. So I would say yes, if you haven't filled out an inquiry form yet, that would be a good thing to fill out and talk more in detail one-on-one about your move and your program space. If you're licensed. So Ruth, this grant isn't meant to bring programs back to their pre-pandemic service numbers. So, and I will just say that, part of that, it isn't that isn't needed or recognized, but this grant comes with very specific parameters around what it can and can't do at state and federal dollars. So it really is really focused on the expansion and addition and the non-standard hours. So it's really focused on growth of childcare in Vermont. So the recording, yes, the recording will be posted. And I don't know if we send it out, but it will definitely be posted on our Let's Grow Kids Early Childhood Educator. There's a grant tab. It'll be posted somewhere in there. Yes, if you are a startup program and you want to use you want to apply for funds for equipment and playground, yes. If you're a startup program, it can be used for that. Oh, I see I have another Ferrisburg person. Okay, does anyone else? I think I got all the questions that are in the chat. Did I miss any questions in the chat? Does anyone else have any questions that's still on the meeting? And if there's Let's Grow Kids staff that feel I missed anything, if they want to ask a question.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Amy, thank you. In terms of needing to have a location, I think part of knowing if a location for us would be possible is knowing if we would be able to do the renovations necessary. So
Mhm.
is it sufficient to, so know that the zoning permit is as it should be? How much do we have to provide in terms of the
Mhm.
information to know that that would work?
So you know, that's another thing, you know, if you fill out the inquiry form, they can talk with you more one-on-one. You know, if you have a site identified and you're working with a landlord or with a, you know, realtor and those types of things, and you've already gone through some of the process, you know, typically you need to be that at least that far along. What doesn't really work well if it's just a vague, like I said before, I live in Ferrisburg, and if I get money, I'll buy a house and I'll open family childcare when I don't really have a site. I don't have an agreement. I'm just throwing out a plan that it wouldn't be competitive, you know, because really there are going to be enough requests that are further along. So when you're looking to when you have you know, a set amount of dollars, you're going to want to fund the projects that are more likely to be successful. And those are the ones that are going to be a little further along. So I think, you know, yes, if you have a site and you've already started some of that work, all of that, yes, there's been projects that have been funded that were successful, but it's really going to depend on how far along you are. And when someone contacts you individually, they can talk that through with you.
Yeah, the site we're looking at is a building owned by the church, and so the fire marshal is going to we have an appointment for him to visit.
Yeah, that's great. Like I don't, you know, just from what you're telling me, you've identified a site, you're working with the landlord of that site, you're in good shape. That's a common space where people are that are opening new programs that apply for this grant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so again, I'm going to throw that link in the chat so that if you haven't filled out that link, you can fill that out and you will hear from somebody, you know, early next week, and they'll talk with you one-on-one. And thank you everyone for participating and thinking about how you can fill the childcare gap in Vermont.